The image you see here represents a simple phylogenetic tree. A phylogenetic tree is a history of lineages, of organisms as they change through time. It implies that different species arise from previous forms via descent, and that all organisms, from the smallest microbe to the largest plants and animals, are connected by the passage of genes along the branches of the phylogenetic tree that links all of life. Let's look at a pretty simple example to start with. From left to right, we have a sponge, a crab, and a bear. Crabs and bears are more closely related to each other than either are to the sponge, so their black lineage lines intersect first here. Sponges, crabs, and bears are all animals, so the node where the crab plus bear lineage meets up with the sponge lineage is marked with a yellow dot and labeled metazoan, which is a term scientists use to refer to animals. Phylogenies also include information about time in them, with the present at the tops or the tips, and the past moving towards the bottom. Therefore, this yellow dot represents the last common ancestor of all animals, an organism which itself is now long gone, but whose ancestors, the sponge, crab, and bear, still remain. This next tree is pretty much the same as the first one, except that we recognize that the crab plus bear lineage is a new group of its own, a subset of animals called bilaterians. Bilaterians are animals whose bodies have a plane of symmetry, left to right, for example. This red dot thus represents the last common ancestor of all bilaterians. This next tree adds in a different type of organism, one that is no longer alive. The trilobite, shown here, is an extinct member of the arthropods, a group that also includes our crab. So we indicate this on a phylogenetic tree by adding in a branch for the trilobites that doesn't quite reach the top of the image. Its branch is shorter because it no longer exists now, but is extinct. If we were to draw the entire tree of life, we'd find that most branches would be these shorter ones. The vast majority of species that have ever lived are now extinct. Now we're going to take a look at a more complicated and larger tree. This tree you see here is a subset of the entire tree of life. It contains all of the animals here, including our bear, our crab, our trilobite, and our sponges. And it also includes the closest single-celled living ancestor to the animals, this blue cell here, which is an organism called a choanoflagellate. You'll notice that the sponges, marked by this green line here, are now shown as 3 different branches instead of just one black branch. This is because recent work by scientists has shown that some groups of sponges are more closely related to the rest of the animal clade over here than they are to each other. That means they can't be represented on the tree by a single lineage line because they don't all share one common ancestor. Instead, we show them as 3 separate lineages. We still call them sponges because they all share some major traits with each other, including the way they feed, by pumping water through the walls of their body and extracting tiny particles of food from the water.
Just to make sure you're understanding what these phylogenetic trees are all about, first off, let's just look at the axes of this tree. This axis right here, if we talk about this being the y-axis, just like in a graph, going from bottom to top, this is really looking at a measurement of time. So time is along this axis. And along this axis, if we want to talk about it as being the x-axis of this phylogenetic tree, this is really relatedness. Of these organisms. And so the farther apart they are, the less related they are. So things such as the bear and the crab here are more related than the bear is to the choanoflagellates, or sponges. And so evolutionary time goes on like this. If we look back in time, we find common ancestors that are along this time scale and timeline. So just be aware that relatedness is along the x-axis and time is along the y-axis. Also remember that more related organisms are going to have a common ancestor that is less far back within evolutionary time. so that the bear and the crab have a common ancestor right in this area, which was much less distant in the past than common ancestor for the bear and the cnidarians. So it allows us to be able to look at relatedness and also time, and also to be able to see common ancestors back throughout